To be honest, what I find really interesting about maps isn't how they map physical space, it's how they can change our view of the world. They can help us see things from different perspectives. And nowhere is this more true than in the maps that come from ancient cultures. In so many of these cultures, the line between art and map and diagram wasn't so crystallized like it is for us. And so religion, meaning, worldview, and space can all blend together in works that today we can only vaguely call maps. But one of these maps that I want to talk about today is called the Bhavacakra, the Wheel of Becoming or the Wheel of Samsara, that we see very widely in Tibetan and ancient Indian Buddhism. It's more what we call a cosmographic or cosmological map. It's a map that depicts something about how the universe works, how it's structured on a metaphysical and symbolic level. It's a map of the world we live in, and it mixes the spatial and the religious in a fascinating way. Many of us are familiar with the basic history and tenets of Buddhism, but let's do a quick review. Buddha himself began the religion in the 6th century BC after his own search for enlightenment took him down a different path than the existing religious culture of the time. He lived in a time and place where people took rebirth for granted, as an accepted part of how the universe worked, a universe in which your endless rebirths were determined, to some extent, by actions that you took in different lives. This world of rebirth is called samsara. Buddha's experience brought him to a realization that there was a way to completely escape samsara, a way to stop rebirth and reach nirvana, a word that means extinguishment, symbolized as the blowing out of a candle. The idea of liberation from rebirth was already in the religious culture at the time, but Buddha had a slightly different take on things. Completely stepping outside of samsara and into nirvana was the whole goal of Buddhist practice. If you really dig into Buddhism, you'll find that it has a very complex and deep philosophy, and a highly detailed description of the world, of human minds, of rebirth, and, well, everything. The details have just grown over time, but even at the start, people asked a lot of difficult questions. One of the core subjects was just about how people were stuck in samsara in the first place, why they stay there, and why it seems so hard to get out. One of Buddha's disciples, Maudgalyayana, is said to have traveled psychically through many realms of rebirth, we'll get to those soon, and returned to describe them to people in detail, along with how you'd end up in one or another and what they were like. The idea was that he was teaching how karma worked and why you ultimately want to get to nirvana. When the Buddha heard about Maudgalyayana's teachings, he said that it was a good way to get across the message to everyday people. And so then he said that those teachings on the different kinds of rebirth, how we get stuck in them and how we get out of them, should be made into a big diagram, a wheel, and painted on the entrance of every monastery and temple to help teach whoever wanted to learn. That's the origin of this Bhavacakra. The earliest example we still have is from Ajanta in India and was made sometime in the 4th or 5th century CE, about 1700 years ago. And it's suffered quite a bit over the years, but we do have many more examples from the centuries that follow, mainly from Tibet, and all of them have the same basic elements. So let's take a look. At first glance, we see this giant wheel, held by a pretty scary-looking figure. There are a few things painted around or outside the wheel, and inside it there are different sections, emanating out from a central hub. All of these elements are in fact quite standardized, and the divisions within the wheel follow strict guidelines in terms of what they depict. One thing though, this definitely doesn't look like a map. It's not showing any land masses, mountains, oceans, or anything really geographical. But let me cook a little, and I'll explain why this isn't just a piece of art, but it's actually a map, even if it's very different from the ones we use every day. I mean, for one, there's a spatial element to the way this wheel is laid out. The wheel itself is samsara, the world of rebirth, the world we live in. And we're meant to follow the illustration from the center outwards. The same way the center serves as the hub of a wheel, which keeps the structure intact, so the center here is the metaphysical underpinning of samsara and rebirth. Without the problems at the core of the wheel, we could get out to nirvana like Buddha did. So those problems, right here at the core, are depicted as three animals. We have the pig, who's really the big one. He represents delusion and ignorance, never caring what he's eating or if it's clean or not. This is supposed to correspond to all of us, acting in ways that hurt ourselves and others because we don't really understand the interconnectedness of ourselves and the world. The other two animals, the snake and the rooster, represent aversion or anger and attachment or greed. The snake, anger, is quick to fury, striking at anything. The rooster, attachment, is so greedy for its mates that it'll fight to death to keep control over them. So these three elements, aversion, ignorance, and attachment, are called the three poisons. Buddhism says that in samsara, in this universe we live in, we're stuck with these all the time. These basic problems drive our actions and basically keep the engine of karma going by getting us to keep acting and desiring and causing problems, making lives of suffering and more rebirth. In the next section, we see this circle split into light and dark halves, with people climbing up on one side and going down on the other. If you've acted well, you go up to a better rebirth. Bad, and you go down to a worse rebirth. But no amount of acting good or bad is going to get you out of the cycle. You'll just keep going up and down forever. Now, a note, this isn't the same as the Christian idea of punishment and reward, though it can seem like it. The idea is that karma's like an impersonal force, like gravity, and it just moves you around. No one's judging you, but you do in a way suffer the consequences of your actions and your intentions. There's a spatial sense to this movement, up into better worlds and down into worse ones, and that's amplified in the next section of the wheel. Here we see different realms you can be born into. These are all existing at once in our universe, but they're different types of lives. This is one way that the Bhavacakra is a map. It maps out how these different realms fit onto our experience of life. So let's look at these realms. Well, down here there's hell. Not where you want to be. Buddhist hell is rough. There's hot Buddhist hell, there's cold Buddhist hell, there's boiling, smashing, screaming, blizzards, impaling. You suffer immensely, continually, so you don't even have any space to feel anything but suffering. Now, you don't stay here for eternity, but you do stay here for a very, very long span of time, many millions of eons perhaps. In some ways, that actually feels more brutal than eternity. But once you get out of hell, because there's nowhere to go but up, you move into the realm of the hungry ghosts. It's a little bit better. The most famous incarnation that you have here is as a being with a huge appetite and a gaping belly, but with a tiny pinhole mouth. So you can never eat enough and you're constantly starving. Maybe this is because you were greedy or gluttonous or something like that in another life. From there, we move into a couple of realms that we are familiar with. There's the animal realm, which is shown as a place of fear and hunger, but some awareness. Animals are always chasing and looking for food and hiding, but they're totally sentient beings. Then we have the human realm, our realm, seen as the most beneficial, but not the most enjoyable. The human realm has enough suffering to make us want to leave samsara behind, but not so much that we're consumed completely by pain. So we can be aware enough and motivated enough to get out. Not so for the realms above us. Everything is really, really good up there. There may be one or two of these realms depending on the Bhavacakra, but they're the realms of heavenly beings, gods and demigods. They war with each other, they feast, they have all the imaginable pleasures that exist. Huge bliss, long lives. But all these realms for Buddhism are still inside the wheel. Even the gods eventually fall down again. So we should recall the three poisons and remember the goal is to get out, not to stay inside these places or move up in rebirths. Now, these places as realms are partly spatial, real places, and partly psychological states of mind. Maybe even in our lives we spent time in hell and in heaven, but we're always passing away from one to the other and we can't hold on to any of them. In this way, the Bhavacakra is both a map of literal places we go and at the same time a description of how we experience being alive. Next, There are 12 panels on the outer edge of the wheel that depict the Buddhist theory of cause and effect, essentially explaining in great depth how karma works, and why it is that our actions continue to beget more suffering and more rebirth. This can get very complex, but the basic progression goes like this. We live in ignorance, and in our ignorance, we start to discern reality as separate from ourselves. We define body and mind, consciousness, and our senses, and we use them to interpret the world around us. Through that interpretation, we become focused on feeling, and then on desire, and then on attachment to the things we want or don't want, the objects of our desire. Because of this attachment, we try to make the world give us what we want, and this makes change, birth and rebirth. Then, death comes, and the whole cycle repeats again. The real idea here is that ignorance, the pig, he's at the root of why we're stuck in the wheel and why karma happens at all. Finally, we're zoomed out enough to see the wheel in general again, and we see that great figure holding the wheel. It's fierce and monstrous with 3 eyes and a gnawing mouth. This is a demon or sometimes a god, but it represents impermanence. All those realms, karma, birth, death, all of it, everything in samsara is always changing and impermanent. Everything we have goes away. The demon represents all that fear and pain of loss. Everything you make, everything you have will be gone, it says. I'll eat it all. So it seems a bit hopeless, but there's more outside the wheel. There's a moon, a great white circle, something pure and perfect, untouched by the figure or the wheel. And there's a Buddha or a Bodhisattva pointing to the moon, telling us that we can go there. The moon is nirvana, the opposite of the wheel, the purified samsara, and Buddhism through the Buddha is the path that brings us out. By studying the Buddha's teachings, meditating and practicing the middle way, we can rid ourselves of the attachment and ignorance that's at the root of all this suffering, and ultimately leave that wheel of samsara behind. So we can see that this is a map. We're stuck in samsara, but somewhere outside that is another way of being, something so far out that it's not like anything in our experience. There are literal places shown here, the realms, and yet they also correspond to psychological and moral states. This is a map of our experience of reality, and it ultimately tries to tell us where we should be trying to go. Cosmographic maps like these aren't for the faint of heart, but to me, they seem like such a great repository of wisdom and ways to understand how our ancestors have seen the world. And even though these things might be a little strange to us now, maybe there's something we can learn from them. I'm really grateful that we have them and that we can still understand what they're trying to describe to us. Buddhism sometimes evokes the image of crossing a great sea to reach nirvana. Nirvana is something beyond, something far beyond the place we are now, and yet it's here in each moment if we could just let go of our ignorance. Can we find peace? Maybe we can. With the Bhavacakra as our guide, at least we have a map. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, you might like another one I did on another map that's more conceptual and spiritual than physical, the Aztec map of Tenochtitlan. Always happy to hear your suggestions as well. Thanks again.